Is MGTOW a gateway to Incel? As somewhat of a YouTube veteran, I've made many accurate predictions and warnings over the years, and it was Paul Joseph Watson's video about incels that made me realise I warned about this around 4 years ago. In this video, I'm going to kick this hornet's nest of a subject once more, undoubtedly garnering negative attention from one of the most toxic sections of the internet. Before proceeding, let's put this video in context. On the 23rd of April 2018, a male by the name of Alec Minassian ploughed a rental van into pedestrians, killing 10 and injuring 16. He was then arrested after trying to provoke a police officer into killing him. It wasn't long before it was discovered that this man was involved in a movement called Incel, standing for involuntary celibacy. I'll admit that I had no idea this movement existed until Paul Joseph Watson made a video about it. But after doing some research, what I discovered was not only appalling, but coincides with warnings and predictions I made when another sexually frustrated mass murderer, Elliot Rodger, was responsible for an attack in 2014. When I made a video about this, I got the usual backlash from men going their own way, otherwise known as MGTOW. One of the most toxic communities on the internet that many people have since fallen afoul of. Admittedly, Nordicist Aryan types are pretty bad, but if you really want to see a brazenly hostile online community, it doesn't get much worse than MGTOW, many of which use anonymity to spew the most vitriolic comments imaginable. Not that it will make any difference to most of the people involved in the MGTOW community, but I'm not suggesting they're all like this, although most are obsessive proselytizers that constantly need to tell people how happy they are and shout down anyone that disagrees with them. Needless to say, if this is what you need to do, then you're only fooling yourself. Since this is relevant, here are some comments by a toxic MGTOW type who decided to dig up old lies about me in a comment section, not long before this video was uploaded. He stated that I believe divorce is always a man's fault. I'm not going to go into depth about this because it's built on layers of mischaracterization, a familiar tactic of liars trying to character assassinate their opponents. My actual position has always been that men should strive to be a good judge of character so they avoid women that will ruin their lives, as well as learn how to be a good father and husband that can do the essential work of raising the next generation. If they do get divorced, men need to realise that they either didn't do the personal development that made them capable of avoiding this, or they need to ask what they did to make their marriage fall apart, all adding up to personal responsibility. The outrage this argument receives from the kind of toxic MGTOWs I'm referring to is exactly the same logical leap you get from feminists when you talk about women avoiding situations that might lead to rape, or any other situation that requires feminists to put their victim mentality aside and do the personal work necessary to make positive changes in their lives. So what is MGTOW and what does this have to do with incels? As the comments directed at me and my family show, this community has a deeply toxic undercurrent that mimics the attitude of a mass murderer like Alec Minassian. But it wasn't always like this. Something changed around the time the men's rights movement began to fall apart. When I first started talking about feminism and men's rights in the early days of my YouTube channel, the men's rights movement was conservative and libertarian. It was then hijacked by shills seeking to line their own pockets and subvert the movement, the same thing happening to MGTOW around the same time. After I started making the kind of videos that Jordan Peterson is now praised for, dealing with personal development, this led to MGTOW subverters singling me out as a married man and father because they didn't want anyone undermining their defeatist message. These subverters then began to campaign to destroy my online support, although this ultimately failed. To this day, MGTOWs linger around online like a bad smell, although it's now clear that the movement has led to splinter ideologies like Incel. When watching Paul Joseph Watson's video, it didn't take me long to notice the crossover between MGTOW and Incel, particularly with a comment referring to women being hypergamous.
Elliot Rodger, Alec Manassian, Dimitrios Pagorsis all went on bloody revenge attack rampages because they were rejected by women. The Santa Fe shooter killed a female classmate, Shauna Fisher, because a week before she turned down his advances. Shauna finally stood up to him and embarrassed him in class, and a week later he opens fire on everyone he didn't like. And to illustrate how truly messed up this incel community really is, they reacted to the massacre by A, celebrating it,
take that hypergamous sluts,
but then B, by debating whether or not the shooter really was an incel because he was just too good looking and may in fact be a high-tier normie. Yeah, if this dude is who you consider to be on the high end of the attractiveness scale, that might be a clue as to why you're having trouble attracting members of the opposite sex.
Watson did allude to this connection in his video.
Incels are a byproduct of our increasingly narcissistic, overprivileged society. They're essentially just honest MGTOWs. MGTOWs, men groping their own wiener, men going their own way, supposedly made the choice to be celibate because feminism turned all women into malevolent, scheming harpies. And it totally wasn't because MGTOWs are almost exclusively fat losers who couldn't attract a fly to a turd. MGTOW for 10 years and I've never been happier. Yeah, mate, you're the male version of a cat lady. The only difference is instead of felines, you collect gaming consoles.
This is where we get to the heart of what MGTOWs believe. There's an inescapably deterministic side to female nature centered on hypergamy. I talked about this in depth during the earlier days of my channel, and I'll briefly summarise that hypergamy is the belief that females try to attract males of higher status than themselves. This is basically connected to the way that women need lots of resources and support for child rearing, requiring them to have babies with males that provide this. While the theory does have some merit, it doesn't give the full picture, in the same way that feminist theories always take an element of truth and twist it. When Elliot Rodger murdered 6 people, some claimed he was connected to the pickup artist community, a group of men using seduction techniques to attract women. But this was a lie. In fact, he was connected to anti-PUA communities. MGTOW also absolutely despise PUAs because they don't espouse the kind of celibate or relationship-free lifestyle they believe in. As a matter of fact, anyone that disagrees with this is treated with deep hostility, which is why so many people have been attacked by MGTOW since I was initially targeted in the same fashion. I've had several private exchanges about this, where people have told me that my criticisms about MGTOW were accurate, or they've vented about how MGTOWs attacked them when they made videos talking about how to have a healthy relationship with the opposite sex. The emasculation of males has led to a crisis of masculinity in society, something that's well documented at this stage. What's far less understood are online gateway communities for disaffected men. Some eventually move on, while others continue transitioning to ever more extreme views. Pickup artists have nothing in common with this, but some failed PUAs end up joining one of these gateway communities. Arguably the earliest of these gateway communities is true forced loneliness, where men claim that society denies them affection from females. When this first appeared, MGTOW was in its infancy and far more philosophically sound. Once the marriage strike became a part of the community, that's when MGTOW became what it is today. From there, the community grew into a hotbed of very angry males that refused to do the personal development necessary to rise above adversity and leave their very troubled pasts behind. Instead, MGTOWs would rather tell people that success is down to luck and spread what we now call the black pill, where everybody should just accept defeat and let civilization fall apart. When Elliot Rodger went on a killing spree, I could already see that what he espoused was a stone throw away from the violent rot infesting the MGTOW community. Sure enough, this led to the rise of Incel, And although this community has been around for some time, it was subverted in the same manner as MGTOW. Now Elliot Rodger has become a literal incel hero and idol, proving that I was right to warn people about the extreme precedent set by MGTOW theories about evil female nature. When MGTOWs attacked me several years ago, I was too humble to point out that the real reason they targeted me was because I was a married father that reminded them of what they don't have. At least incels are honest about this, making it perfectly clear on their forum. Many of these men are lost causes that are too far gone to be saved. But if we're going to stop this nihilistic cycle from continuing, we need to go back to a time where masculinity is no longer treated as toxic. This is Rocking Mystery, over and out.